Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you for coming. This is very exciting. My name is Maya May. I am the host of LPTV's We're Speaking, along with Lisa Senecal, and welcome to our town hall. This is an incredibly special town hall because among the hundreds of you watching are people that chose now to reactivate and to get involved again with LP for the first time this cycle. We need everyone in this fight, and you couldn't have picked a better time. Speaking of a better time, the news is kind of exhausting. I'm sure you all have been watching, and we are all about action. We know what we're up against. So a lot of our strategies are all about engaging at the right place at the right time. And that's why Stuart and Steve are here to talk to you tonight. We are making a difference. They truly need no introduction. But let's go ahead and do it anyway. We have Stuart here, Stuart Stevens. He is after working on George W. Bush's 2 presidential campaigns and serving as a consultant for several major congressional candidates. Stevens was Mitt Romney's top strategist in 2012. He began speaking out against Donald Trump in 2016, and today is a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. In his new book, It Was All a Lie, which you absolutely must read, how the Republican Party became Donald Trump, he tells the story of his long career in politics and how the party he once worked for has been subsumed by nativism, bigotry, and cruelty. Yes, it has. And then we also have, hello, by the way, let me say hi to you real quick. Hi, Stuart.
Thank you for doing this.
Good. All right. Glad you are here. Along with you is Steve Schmidt. As a counselor to world leaders, CEOs, celebrities, and political movements over the past 2 decades, Steve Schmidt has played an influential role in American politics and helped navigate some of the most high-stakes corporate crises and business strategy challenges of our time. Steve is best known for his senior roles advising President George W. Bush, presidential candidate Senator John McCain, and California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. He is a co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Thank you, Steve, for being here tonight.
All right, good to be with you.
Yeah, this is great. All right, let's get started. We're here to figure out some things, to talk about some things. So I'm going to start with you, Steve. Tell us, what are we looking at?
Well, look, I wish I could come on and tell you that we're winning. We're not. Republicans have had a very good year, November to November. You know, the old saying, the days are long, the years are short. Year goes quickly. So we're upon the year anniversary of Trump's initial denial of the loss of the election, an event that we predicted. We talked about how dangerous it would be before it happened. We said at the time, the thing that we did not know is when he did that, how many Republicans would cross the Rubicon with him? How many would cross the waters into seditious territory? And the answer is most of them. And in fact, I think truthfully, when it comes right down to it, right, you have less than 10, but really 2 in Kitzinger and Liz Cheney that are unafraid to speak to the truth about what happened with everything. And so the Republican Party is more extreme. It has raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It has embedded into its dogma, to its doctrine, fidelity to the big lie that the election was stolen. The party is teeming with intimations of violence at the places where it connects to an assortment of fringe coalitions and extremist groups, from Proud Boys, other fascist paramilitary. And the Democratic Party could have predicted this. Many people did, but no action has been taken over the course of the year to harden any of the infrastructure for our democracy. And so where we stand right now, there are 3 elections in the last 120 years where the incumbent president's party has picked up seats in the first midterm election. One of those years was 1934. And there was a huge schism in the Democratic Party between its FDR New Deal wing in the socialist wing manifested in Upton Sinclair's run for governor of California, which FDR was very worried about. And despite that schism in the Democratic Party, they went on to win. Right now, the stories are about the Democrats. The stories need to be about the extremism of Trump and the Republicans. Between today and the election will be the January 6th commission hearings. And I believe there'll be monumental events because we'll find out everything that happened in the complicity of some of the highest elected officials in the country in an assault on the Constitution of the United States. And then a great question will be put before the American people. And I think that when we look at that question, at the heart of it is democracy. And I'll just very quickly tell this story and then kick it back, which is a lesson from a life that deserves a listen. The man's name was Avner Less. He was an Israeli police captain. And his career was defined by an interrogation of a mass murderer who he spent 750 hours with and then talked about nearly a quarter century after the fact in the early 1980s. And Avner Less talked about the man he interrogated, Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi war criminal. And what he said was, when asked whether it changed his perspective on anything, he said, it changed my perspective on everything with regard to the importance of democracy. So because there's Eichmanns all around us, they're latent, they're harmless in a democracy, but they become deadly, they become lethal in a dictatorship of the left or the right. And I thought that was a profound insight from a man who sat across from one of history's greatest monsters. And when we look at this moment, I think it bears mentioning that democracy, which is surely under threat, despite all of its flaws and in all of its forms from all over the world, right? Swedish, Dutch, Norwegian, Japanese, South African, everywhere. Democracy is under threat. Why that matters is it's because it's the only moral form of government that's ever been, because it's the only form of government that puts the individual atop the power of the state. And that is the only way that history teaches us that the dignity of the human being can be protected from an assault by tyranny. And so the consequences of these elections that are ahead of us are monumental. And being in the fight is something that's really important for everyone to understand as we go into now this second year with 1 year to go before a great question gets answered. In that year, and what the question is about in our national politics has to look a lot different than what it's looked like over the last year. Because what it's looked like over the last year to me looks like losing. And what it needs to look like over the next year is around the issues and around the stories that will win an election with significant headwinds, historical and otherwise.
Well, that is sobering. I'm sure everybody right now needs to take a quick sip if you need to. It's an incredibly sobering moment in history, and so I appreciate the clarity. I'm sure everybody else appreciates the clarity as well.
Let me just say to anyone feeling down after that to remember the words of Chairman Mao, which is, it's always darkest before it's completely black.
Well, and on that, and that's the thing. So we know right now that we didn't think it was going to be an easy fight. we didn't get in this fight because we thought it was going to be an easy fight. And so I'm super happy that we have Stuart Stevens here now to talk about that fight and what it is that we are doing this year.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks, Steve. I have the privilege, and it is a privilege to hang out and get to talk to Steve a lot. And he never, every time I always learn something. He has a fascinating perspective on the moment and a sense of history that few of us have. I want to thank everybody for we all have very busy lives, and to be able to join us on this. I think the greatest danger we face is not realizing the greatest danger. To kind of pick up where Steve, the point Steve was making. In many ways, this kind of feels like a normal time. We have a normal president at last. We're sort of debating normal issues, like whether or not we're going to have this huge spending bill and this and that. But really, I don't think it is a normal time. And if you think about what Biden is doing right now, he's negotiating with Congress and all this. But what's unique about, and this is what's happened with Social Security bills, Obamacare, any Medicare, any big bill. They're trying to pass something that really is monumental. But what is unique about this moment is the Republican Party does not believe that Joe Biden is a legal president. And just wrap your mind around that and what that means in the process of government that we're involved in. And it really is unlike any moment that we've had since 1860. That if you don't believe that Joe Biden is a legally elected president, that means we live in an occupied country, which means we don't live in a democracy. And that's really where the Republican Party is. It is the official position of the Republican Party that we don't live in a democracy. And look, as somebody that worked decades in the Republican Party, I find it incredibly shameful that this is true, but it is true. And I think that how we got here, we can talk about. I really wrote about that a lot in my book. I tried to. It was all a lie. Analyze what happened to the Republican Party. But what counts is how we go forward. And I think one of the unique roles that the Lincoln Project plays in this is we are not representing any special interest at all. We don't have clients. We really are a citizens group. And we're a citizens group with basically one mission, which is to defend democracy. And when you look out over all the groups that are out there in the country, right and left, but look at the ones that are sort of center left. There are a lot of great organizations out there. But if one of them fell by the wayside, another one would step up and take its place and help push a democratic agenda, help push democratic kind. There's not a second group in waiting other than the Lincoln Project that is basically was created by former Republican consultants that know how to beat Republicans with the mission to defend democracy. And I think that we have to grasp where we are and not be ashamed or hesitant or embarrassed to speak the truth. And one of the advantages that autocrats have is the hesitancy for those who are pro-democratic to recognize the danger. And I think it is, whatever we say now can sound alarmist, but it's like a pandemic. What you say at the beginning may sound alarmist, but at the end is going to prove inadequate. Mm-hmm. And I really do believe that what we are engaged in now is going to be looked back in the history of America as a turning point. And either we're going to slide into something that is really unrecognizable as a democracy as we've known, or we're going to have this resurgence and we're going to defend democracy. And what is it that Republicans want? Well, they tell us we should listen to them. They want Viktor Orban in Hungary. This is where the new model. And Viktor Orban took power not through a violent coup, but through the ballot box and the court system. And when you read books like Twilight of Democracy by Anne Applebaum, or How Democracies Die by the two Harvard professors, They really make this point that this is how democracies die. And what we are about now is defending this incredible legacy. And I'll just mention what really breaks my heart more than disappoints me, disgusts me, whatever you want to say, so much about these Republicans is they're the heir to the greatest generation. I mean, people like my dad, it was just so common. I spent 3 years fighting in the South Pacific, 28 island landings, comes back, just goes about his life like so many others, and passed on this legacy of democracy. And these Republicans, they can't even get their comm shop to put out a 3-sentence statement congratulating who won the presidential race in the United States. I mean, they're not being asked to charge a machine gun nest or take a beach or get out of the boat when the guy in front of them got shot. And it's a pretty low level of commitment, but they don't have that commitment to democracy. So there's only one way to deal with this, and that is to defeat them. Mm-hmm. You can't negotiate with this. You can't reason with it. You can't meet them halfway, like we're going to have like half left of democracy. You have to beat them. And so we have to have more days like we had January 5th in Georgia. And that is a huge challenge going into these elections. I was, Steve was, very involved on the Republican side in 2002, which is the last time a party in power gained seats. And we did it by nationalizing the race. It was about domestic security. And what Democrats have to do is nationalize this race about democracy and make it a referendum on patriotism, that it is the patriotic duty to support democracy. And there really aren't two political parties in America with different ideology now. There's one party that is pro-democratic, and there's one party that is pro-autocracy. And that makes all these other issues like so inconsequential. I think back to the million ads I made about capital gains tax or trade or healthcare. I just want to laugh. Like, really? I mean, we thought that was important compared to what this is now. I mean, this is the moment that we're called to. Mm-hmm. And we're either going to rise to that together, or what'll happen here is that we'll lose the democracy, which is, America is the world's oldest functioning democracy, which is both encouraging and incredibly frightening. Because what happened to those other democracies? They faded. Yeah. So no one's going to save us but ourselves. And all we can do is fight. And you guys that are on this call, and so many of your friends, and have been so central to that fight. And we have good days and we have bad days, and it's easy to get discouraged. But we have to just stay in the fight. And because if we don't fight, the other side will win.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that, Stuart. And staying in the fight is so very important. It's an urgent moment. I feel like the house is on fire, and everybody that is listening, watching right now understands that the house is on fire. And so thank you so much for being here with us on that thing. But can you talk about what we're doing in Virginia and what's happening with that election that's coming up and some of our strategies going forward?
Well, I'll just jump into Virginia. We have been, to us, this is a very simple race. On November 3rd, 2020, Virginia voted for Joe Biden by 10 points. On November 2nd, 2021, if you didn't vote for Donald Trump a year ago, why would you vote for Donald Trump now? And Glenn Youngkin is Donald Trump's hand-picked candidate. Youngkin wouldn't have won the primary without his support. He refuses to refute Trump on any issue. He won't stand up to Trump. I mean, you saw when Donald Trump said this, incredibly ugly, horrible things about John McCain, like last week or so. Youngkin won't even challenge that. Not even an American hero like John McCain. And he's using the same racial codes that Donald Trump did. Mm-hmm. So we have tried to make this clear, and I think we've had some impact in this race. I think that the McAuliffe campaign is now focused on this. And we've also been out there challenging Donald Trump to come in and campaign for Glenn Youngkin. We made an ad a couple of days ago that was one of these classics that Rick Wilson sort of invented this genre. We call them whispers ads, an audience of one that were running down in Florida, so Donald Trump sees it all the time. That says, Donald Trump, Glenn Youngkin needed your support. He wanted your support. You gave him his support. Now he doesn't want you to come in and campaign for him. Are you going to let that happen? And, within hours of us releasing this ad, Trump announced that he was going to come to Virginia. Now, the Youngkin campaign has tried to beat that down. We'll see if they're going to be successful or not. But that's what the race is about. And I'll just say one other thing. Whether McAuliffe wins or whether McAuliffe or Youngkin wins, we should not make the mistake of looking at this as determinative of giving it too much import. And I'll just give you an example. I work for Republican governors in Massachusetts. I work for Republican governor in Maryland, in Vermont. Those states did not go Republican in the general election or any other races. I mean, sometimes governor's races are very much sort of one-off. In New Jersey, I work for Chris Christie, and New Jersey still stayed very Democrat. So, look, it's better to win than lose, but I think we have to be careful not to take too much comfort if McAuliffe wins and not be panicked if he doesn't win.
I like it. Managing expectations, that is definitely important at this point. Steve, so psychological warfare, it feels like that's what's happening right now. We talk about the audience of one. Can you talk about a little bit how we get in the Republicans' head into the GOP's head in order to actually force change that we need to see?
Well, I'm not sure that there is anything that we can do to force change within the Republican Party other than to defeat it, and that change organically from within will, like green shoots from a forest that is burned, emerge in the soil, and something new will grow. And I hope that will happen. In the meantime, I think that confronting this for what it is, directly, honestly, repeatedly, is of the highest importance. And so when you look at the Republican Party right now, what they have succeeded in over the course of the last year, because the Democrats have an unfair burden in that they are trying to govern the country and are opposed not by a loyal opposition, but by a nihilistic mob that wants to vandalize the country. There's a lot of difficulties that come from that. But the Republican Party, this election has to be made about them, about their extremism, about the proposition that they stand for in the country. And I think Democrats need to understand that the Republican message of Black Lives Matter is coming to teach critical race theory and indoctrinate your children to hate you, and the socialists are coming to take all of your stuff, and these people hate you. And yeah, Trump's a pig, but he is the only thing standing between you and those people over here who hate you, who despise you. And that is the message, right? That is spoon-fed out of Fox News every rancid hour of every day, that flows downstream to the algorithmic imprisonment imposed by Facebook on so many millions and millions of people who click on a link on an interest point and are in QAnon land 48, 72 hours later. So there are so many forces that are out there that are shaping this moment. And like what I would say is that so many times we talk about all of this moment to moment. You know, the news is constructed to cover, sometimes very appropriately, very deeply, that moment. But it's not really a series of disconnected moments we're living through. We are living through a merging of rivers, a confluence of events at a great hinge of history. No matter what, in 2024, I think Trump will be the nominee. But whomever it is, Trump, DeSantis, Abbott, whatever, if they lose, they'll claim that they won. If they get into power and they lose, they'll do everything they can to stay in power. You can see these events, the contours, the architecture of the river, of where it's going to take us over the next couple of years. And so we're going to have a series of enormously consequential elections that are going to be shaped by people, and the people we're talking about in this movement, Trump's movement, because it's an autocratic movement and a cult of personality. These organizations become highly unstable because everybody is ready to be pitted against everybody in competition for the king's favor. Trump being the king, you know, Jared being the crown prince at one point. And so what we approached the fight was through in all of this is, how can you unsettle? How can you destabilize the organization? We got the campaign manager fired. We created mass turmoil in these campaigns. If you read all of the books that, you know, have come after and analyzing it, and that's what you seek to do in 22. Then when Trump says, you know, on any given day, I want all Republicans to know the only way to fight back against the voter fraud is not to vote in 22. You know, that's going to be an armament. That happened in Georgia. That's why, you know, we have 2 senators in Georgia from the Democratic Party in part. And so, you know, that's the fight. That's how we do this. And I think it's an effective way, you know, that we pioneered a new style of fighting, if you will, is we're going to attack the organization directly. And we're going to attack it internally at the hinge points where it functions, and try to expose its dysfunctions for the point of disabling it, like throwing sand into an engine. And I think that plays an important role in both shaping the narrative, but doing what you need to do to set up the situation where this is the 4th election in 122 years. You hope to be able to say where the incumbent president's party picked up seats. And today, that's not the track we're heading on.
I love to hear about this strategy about forced errors. So very important. We're also following the money, corporate accountability. Stuart, can you talk a little bit about the corporate accountability campaigns?
Well, you know, I have to give Steve credit. He really grasped this as an essential part of how to stop this movement. And there, you know, money is, politics is a lot about money. And there is a fundamental contradiction. We've seen almost every major company, small company in America take a position in the last couple of years, 18 months, with a rededication to diversity and a Black Lives Matter moment, asserting that they have values that are consistent with non-discriminatory policies, all of that. And then you have a moment after Trump is elected on January 6th, where the attempt to disqualify so many voters who predominantly are African American. That's when they really don't, there's not any secret here. We should just listen to these people a lot, So when Trump talks about where all these illegal votes were, he's not saying that it was like in Grosse Pointe. He's saying it's Detroit. It's in the center of Atlanta. It's where all these, non-white people live. And they're the ones that have done this illegal stuff. And you have this extraordinary moment where you attempt to disqualify their votes. So how can a corporation say that it supports these values and then continue to fund politicians who are about the business of disqualifying African Americans, and in doing so, in the greatest gift that we have inherited, which is a peaceful transition of power? So we have attempted to hold these groups accountable. We've had a lot of success at this. One of the unique things about the Lincoln Project, and you kind of have to maybe been involved in politics to grasp this, we don't have any special interests that support us. And Democrats and Republicans both have a stable of special interests that support them. We don't. We don't have a client and we don't have special interest. So we can go out and hold Toyota accountable and not worry that Toyota is going to get mad at us and not support other clients that we have. We can go out and hold AT&T accountable and not worry that it's going to hurt our funding or they may do this, because really we exist because of you. That's it. Mm-hmm. We don't get money from the government. We don't get money from special interests. We just get money from you guys. And that gives us a lot of power, because we can go out and say stuff that you want to have said, that needs to be said, that other larger political organizations are not going to go out and say. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to do more of this. It is so extraordinary that if you're a CEO of a company in America today, your company, this is an environment in which capitalism has flourished. You have a pretty good run here, right? So why is it that you would not do everything you can to support democracy? I mean, look at the alternative and look at Putin. You want to be CEO in Putin's Russia? How does that work out? If for no other reason than self-interest, it is critical that these companies rise to the occasion to defend democracy and realize that they can't have it both ways. You can't support autocratic, anti-democratic forces and say you're for democracy.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. And I love that we're able to be responsive to the needs of the people, responsive to the people who are supporting the Lincoln Project. It's incredibly important that we can do that. And to that end, we do have questions from some of the Lincoln Project community members. So I want to jump into some of those. This first question, I'll throw this to you, Steve, from Tom Diaz. What is your strategy for 2022 Republican primaries, since electing even moderate Republicans will give control to the Trumpist-dominated party?
Well, we will oppose the election of Republicans up and down the ballot because broadly they're supporters of the big lie. There's a couple exceptions to that, Adam Kitzinger, Liz Cheney, but we're not going to be trying to play a role in reforming the Republican Party. The way we would look at it is, let's say you have a crazy candidate, Ohio, for example, would be an example of this. For me, personally, right, this isn't a Lincoln Project policy, right? But the most important Senate race to me is the Ohio Senate race. In my personal opinion, this is the most important race of the cycle, right? For a Democrat to be able to win in the state. There's a great candidate there, Tim Ryan. You have two Republican candidates. One is a full-on political extremist religious fanatic. And the other one, J.D. Vance, who wrote Hillbilly Elegy, is a fraudulent fascist. Both of them are terrible. Let's say one of them is a weaker prey animal in the general election for Tim Ryan. We would be for getting that person through the Republican primary by doing anything we could do to get the weakest candidate out there. It could be that in a closed primary, you see ads that are just like the Lincoln Project endorses so-and-so, who's the crazier by far of the two candidates, right? Or excuse me, right? Who's the less crazy of the two for the purposes, right, of getting the crazier guy in, because they're easier pickings in the general election. But being able to run against the crazy is an important part of the strategy to defy the historical headwinds and to come out on top of the redistricting headwinds, which will cost about 12 seats. So it's a tough task. It's doable, but it requires a better political year in 22 than was had in 21.
Thank you. Stuart, did you want to speak to that at all?
Well, look, I worked a lot in Ohio. I worked in the presidential races. Ohio was one of the states I focused on. I worked for Rob Portman, the current senator from Ohio, who's not running for re-election. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me what has happened to the Republican Party in Ohio. You take this guy, Josh Mandel, who's running against J.D. Vance, right? I don't know J.D. Vance personally, but I knew Josh Mandel. Josh Mandel was not ever a very good politician, but he was at least a sane human being that you could, not be afraid to let your, family around. And now, because I don't think he really believes this stuff, but it doesn't matter if he really believes it. He sees, and it's just so emblematic of where the Republican Party is. It is a battle for who can be the most extreme, the most crazy. Mm-hmm. So you have Josh Mandel saying, of course, we shouldn't have separation of church and state. That's outrageous, And J.D. Vance, who, I mean, he's just a guy who will say anything. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And these are people that are vaccinated, their families are vaccinated, and they're running on basically an anti-vax platform. So I think Steve is right. Ohio is a key state here. It is one that if J.D. Vance or Josh Mandel gets elected, it will just be one more degradation of our politics, mm-hmm. and one more accelerant to end of democracy in America.
Okay, so yeah, we are so aware of this panorama. I have a question from Alan Silver. He wants to know, is there any possible strategy for shaming or motivating former backbone possessing senators and Congress members like Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski to take up the spirit of the late Senator McCain and stand up for what they know is right? I feel like I know the answer to this one, but
that's for
who
Steve.
Wants to take it? Yeah, Steve, you want to take that?
No one was closer to McCain than Steve.
I think it's the wrong point of emphasis, right? As we look ahead in the long term, the truth of the matter is Mitt Romney's a conservative Republican. Anybody who thinks that Mitt Romney's going to vote for, $3.5, $4 trillion, $5 trillion of spending is delusional. And Mitt Romney is voted to impeach, and there are 10 to 12 Republicans who have stood up for the rule of law. he's one of them. And I think we should praise those people and not confuse, right, partisan disagreement on an issue with the hard line they drew and, the hatred and the threats and the contempt, that those members who did stand up and oppose it, even if they disagree, with anyone's position, who's listening tonight, is to appreciate that one of the things we're fighting for is the ability to disagree. And one of the great lies we've been told in this country, and made much worse, is the idea that maybe the greatest lie of all is that anyone who disagrees with you on anything or looks differently than you is your mortal enemy and has to be destroyed. And we're going to have to figure out as a people, a society, and a nation to come back from that. I'll say this: I was on an MSNBC show, and I very rarely have the instinct of, well, I really wish I had said something different when I got off. But I was asked about a clip that they showed to react to from The Daily Show, which I watch and I think is funny. And the interview clip was a guy in front of his pickup truck with a hat on, espousing QAnon theory, saying the QAnon shaman with the horns on, in fact, wasn't there because he didn't like Trump. He's against Trump. The CIA did it. And what I said when I was asked to respond to it was, it's obviously, he's opted out of reality, which about 30% of the country did. And then they went over and they interviewed two women, who are festooned in Trump regalia and Lycra pants, both overweight, both Southern accents. And, they start talking about that they're not in a cult. And, the point is, to laugh, right? To laugh at them. And what I wish I said, going back to it, is to look at the first guy and say, that guy's a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he's at the bottom rung or two of the society. Right. If we're going to direct our anger, let's not do it at the bottom rung.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it at the people who poisoned them. And then the second part with the women, I thought to myself as I was watching it, and I love the show, and it wasn't even indirect, but do we ever get tired of laughing at them? Right, of condescending
Mm-hmm.
the 30, 40, 50 million people in the country. I'd really encourage people who are on this to watch the show on Hulu, Dope Sick, which characterizes a small Virginia town that's decimated by opioids. But all over this country, you have people that haven't been seen, haven't been heard. 40% of the country doesn't have $400 of cash available. The middle class jobs were sent overseas by globalization. They have declining life expectancies, rising infant mortality rates, 100,000 people a year dying of opioids, and the rage, the anger. Trump was seen as someone who heard it, saw it. And that rage and anger and its ability to be twisted into something malevolent is something we have to understand, because it compels the people that are in positions of political leadership to recognize that they have to offer something better. And if you want to understand what better is, right? And a lot of times people ask, hey, what can I do? Right? What's something concrete I can do to go think about? And I would say this: here's one thing you can do. It'll take a couple minutes. Watch with your kids tonight, or grandkids, or your spouse, or with friends, over the course of the weekend. go and find and watch the video of Robert Kennedy informing a crowd in Indianapolis that Dr. King has just been shot and murdered. Now, historically, Indianapolis was the only American city that didn't burn that night. But go watch that speech, right? We as a society, right, have questions that we have to get to with what type of society, what type of country we're going to be, that are much deeper than an election, but we're not going to be able to get to them if we can't hold these guys, and mostly they are guys, back from taking power in this country. And we should take very, very seriously what they have all but screamed from the brightest Broadway banners and screens, that they don't intend to give up power if they get it again and happen to be rejected by the American people.
Yeah, I think it's so important to keep that big picture energy. It's like, yes, we know the systemic issues that we're all dealing with, but it's so nice to also hear that empathy for the people who are the victims of all of this, because at the same, we're all in this together, in one country together. And so that pro-democracy coalition that we talk about bringing together is so incredibly important for the sustainability of everything. To that point, another question from Don Westenhaver. He says, I'm happy to see the Lincoln Project getting increased visibility. Good work. Separately, I also keep hearing the name of former GOP leaders and conservative thinkers who are disgusted about Trump hijacking their party. They make up several groups that have some of the same objectives as the Lincoln Project: George Bush, George Will, David Jolly, Max Boot. Are you looking around at potential allies? We need all the strength and strategy we can muster to defeat Trumpism. That one's for you, Stuart.
Look, I have, those are all people I greatly respect. I admire what they've said about Donald Trump. We at the Lincoln Project come at this from a different perspective. We're not about saving the Republican Party. We're about burning the Republican Party to the ground, because I don't think that there's any elements of it, for the most part, that are redeemable. I'll give you a perfect example. There is a little cluster of other Republicans out there who are governors of these blue states. Now, I happen to work for all these guys. Phil Scott in Vermont, Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, Larry Hogan in Maryland, right? These guys are good public servants. They're very popular. They're doing a really good job as governor. They're elected as Republicans. None of them can pick their own state party chairman in their states, which is just extraordinary in politics, that a sitting governor can't control their own state party. And that's because they are so removed from where the party is. And to me, that is just such a telling reality, that the Republican Party, as it exists now, is irredeemable. It is the official position of the Republican Party that Joe Biden is not a legally elected president, which means we don't live in a democracy, we live in an occupied country. How do you redeem that, right? I mean, you take Mitch McConnell, right? The guy goes to sleep on January 5th, majority leader of the Senate. He wakes up on January 6th. He's minority leader, and he's running for his life by terrorists who are inspired by the president. And yet he still won't vote to hold Donald Trump responsible. And he has said on the record that he would vote for Donald Trump again in 2024. So if the guy who inspired people who came and tried to kill you and your colleagues is someone you'll still support, tell me how that is a party that is worth saving. We kind of don't talk about this enough. There is no Republican Party platform except to support Donald Trump. And you have to be involved in Republican politics to understand the viciousness of platform fights. And you could argue whether or not they were meaningful or not, but they were sure as hell meaningful to a lot of people that were involved in them. And now that's just all out the window. We're just going to support Donald Trump. That's how it is in Russia. You know, it's how it is in North Korea. It's whatever the dear leader wants. So Um, I'm not about, and we're not about trying to save the elements of that party. It has to be defeated. And from that, there is a need for a center-right ideology in this country. Hopefully, at some point, some different iteration will arise that will be morally grounded and have some coherent governing philosophy. But it's not going to be tied to the current Republican Party.
No, unfortunately not. We have already seen that to be the case. It's just, it seems to be going off, on the highway, those little ridges that are on the side of the road to keep you from veering off too far.
The rumble strips.
Yes, the rumble strips. I feel like we've hit the rumble strips, and it's time to wake up, very much so. I have a question. We've talked about the panorama. We have the pain points. We know what we're facing. I deeply want to know, as a mom in this country, as a human being, what are the milestones that I should be looking for going forward? What are some of the things that need to happen so that I can watch and go, okay, yes, we're moving in the right direction? What does it look like?
Steve?
What's the election about? What is, for example, in the reconciliation bill? I don't pose that as an adversarial question to anybody. I don't know. A team of armed men could break in here now, hold a gun on me and say, tell us what's in the reconciliation bill with my life depending on it. Truly, I don't know. So we've had months of debate about disagreement, about nothing, without a larger frame, a construction, an architecture of what it is that this moment is about, the magnitude of it, what's at stake. I think that, and I was thinking about this and thinking about the sorry state of race relations in this country as a white male who's thought a lot more deeply about these issues and read a lot of Black history over the last couple of years. And the question to me is this: do my white kids, Americans, share in the legacy of Dr. King? I believe they do, right? I believe it's not just a Black American legacy, though it is a glorious one. It is a profoundly important American legacy that has to be accessible to all of us, because it marks a moment where the collection, as King said, of the promissory note, right, that we're all equal. That's what's at stake as a first principle here around January 6th, around the conspiracies, that we just want to stop and say, at a core level, do we want to live in a country where all of us have an opportunity to pursue happiness, to pursue life and liberty equally? That no one is above another from the circumstances of their birth, that no one is treated unjustly and denied opportunity because of the color of their skin. Can we agree within the 5-year mark of our 250th anniversary that vision and version of the American Republic is the one that we want to build? That is what Ronald Reagan was talking about when he talked about a shining city on the hill. That shining city cannot shine until it is for all of us. And if it is for all of us, then the force that says no, these people have to be excluded. When the leader of the communications wing of the House Republican caucus uses white replacement theory which is from the white supremacists, from the neo-Nazis. It's at the core of their ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And she walks into rooms and is regarded as a person of good faith in Washington and sits on the board of the National Endowment for Democracy. That's why this group is important, because this group will fight through the hypocrisy of that. But when we look at this moment, there is no place to meet in the middle with a fascist. There's no place to meet in the middle and work it out with the white supremacist, with the white nationalist. They're on the wrong side of history, the wrong side of the American creed. And this will be decided in elections. And so this moment requires moral clarity around what's at stake, and to do it repetitively and to do it forcefully and to talk about the consequences of what's going on. In fact, right, all over the country right now, right, there are places of business that can't operate because they can't find employees. Everywhere I go, right, in the country, right, that seems to be the case. Gas prices are high. Inflationary pressures are high. These issues have to be talked about. They have to be addressed. The idea, right, the great gaslighting that the Trump presidency was some type of golden age, or the country was inherently more stable than it is here a year later. Like the shock, right, that message has to some effect been effective, right, is an appalling piece of evidence in the larger communications failure. And so this group, in terms of trying to set a narrative, tell a story, and construct an architecture that you can fight from and frame the race, I think it is as important right now as it was when we did it initially in December of 2019. Because right now, what the story's about is the Democrats, and as it's about them and not about the extremism, they're literally bleeding out as the poll numbers are moving into the danger marks of the 30s for Biden and his administration.
So we are storytellers, and we need to tell a story where democracy wins. That's the story that people need to hear. That's what, to me, this has been a master class in understanding what that looks like. And I hope that everybody who has been watching and listening sits with that, and then share that. Please share our mission, because we can't do this without everyone involved. And I have learned so much, not just tonight, but since my time with the Lincoln Project and with LPTV, from listening to not just the podcast, but the shows. Stuart Stevens, Steve Schmidt are brilliant strategists. And I am so incredibly grateful that we were able to be here tonight in conversation. For everybody to please continue to follow what we do. You can sign up for email by going to lincolnproject.us and get involved. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can join the Lincoln Project Crew Facebook group, or it's Meta now. I'm not sure if it's going to be the Facebook group or the Meta group. That keeps changing. You can also donate. But incredibly grateful for everybody being here tonight. And we hope you have a good one. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, Maya.